two of those backbenchers, including one of Mr Albanese's, Chairman of the Parliamentary Joint Committee on Intelligence and Security, Mr Andrew Hastie, he's the Liberal, and Deputy Chair of the committee, Anthony Byrne, he's Mr Albanese's from Canberra. Gentlemen, you two are well briefed and absolutely across the China issue. You've indeed been talking about it for not just 1, 2 or 3 years, for much longer than that. I want to start with you, Andrew Hastie. Before we get into the substance of some of these issues, there was a report today that you've been called into the Prime Minister's office. Now, some are painting that as a rebuke. Others are saying it's a briefing. What can you tell us?
Well, good evening, Peter. The truth of the matter is that the Prime Minister exercises a consultative style of leadership with the coalition backbench, and earlier in the week a number of us had a fireside chat with the Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister. There's nothing more to it, but as for the substance of the meeting and who attended, that's a confidential, private matter. But I can confirm there was a meeting and it was a fireside chat, and it's a good thing too because we come all the way to Canberra, and it would be silly if we didn't have the opportunity to talk to our leader.
Yeah, you certainly don't look beaten up by my standards anyway. And Anthony Byrne, a factional sort of question going to you. I have noticed, or, you tell me if I'm wrong, that those on your side who are having a conversation about the tensions, Australian values and Australian trade and the relationship with China tend to all be on the right of the Labor Party, and those that are silent on issues, and Kim Carr, who goes out there in the Nazi sort of terminology, are on the left. Is that just an accident?
Well, Penny Wong's on the left, Peter, and thanks very much for having me on your program again. And I'd say she's a strong voice of reason and considered calm in this debate. And I've particularly worked with Penny and Jennifer McAllister, who was on the left, and also Tanya Plibersek when she served on the committee as well. And all of those people are sober and very serious and calm and deliberative when it comes to discussing matters and contemplating matters of national security. So I don't think we can just make it a left-right thing. But I would say that it is useful to have calm, deliberate voices. We're getting to the business end of the season with respect to where we go with this independent political inquiry. And that's why I think the government is probably suggesting to some of its people that they might want to dial the rhetoric down.
Andrew Hastie, what hope do you have? Australia certainly, pushed the boat out that we would have an inquiry. The world should have an inquiry. It should be independent, should be impartial, should be transparent. What hope have you got that Sherry Matson makes the point that once it gets bowled up to the World Health Assembly, it could die a quick death? Do you think that will happen? What hope do you have that it will actually eventuate?
Well, we all have high hopes that it will go forward and that it will be supported at that Assembly. And that's why we support the Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister in their best endeavours to make that happen. We're a regional power with global interests. We want to work with as many countries as possible in a good spirit. We're also a trading nation. We've always been a net importer of foreign capital. So we've got to remain in contact across the globe with as many countries as possible. But as the Prime Minister said today, we'll always stand up for Australian interests and we'll always stand up for Australian values.
You were right to remind me it's not necessarily a left-right issue, Anthony Byrne, because the AWU, the Workers' Union, was out today supporting the Prime Minister on his calls for an independent inquiry. This is not an either-or proposition, is it? We can stand up for Australia's values but have a good, strong commercial relationship with China. Some in the business community, though, want us to shut up and take the money and not ever speak out on the values issues. This is the inevitable tension that sits inside the office of a politician, not so much around the boardroom. How do you think we balance that relationship?
I think, Peter, you alluded to this in the discussion that we had the last time I was on your program about business leaders ringing you up. We have to wait. People that come out and just talk about this in purely economic terms, that are business people that derive the bulk of their income from the Chinese government, we need to weight their advice. We need to weight their opinions. And I noticed that some of them are talking about national security. Like I said to you before, I'll take my national security advice from the agencies, not from business people that line their pockets from the regime, from the CCP. I think it needs to be balanced. I think there needs to be balanced. And what I don't like from the business community is that governments the Australian government, create the environment in a democracy that allows them to make profits. We provide the security, we provide the architecture. So they are one voice amongst many that we have to contemplate, but they can't be the dominant voice. And when government makes a decision about what's best in the national interest, they are one voice, but I'll never support them being a dominant voice.
And look, I have no issue, Andrew Hastie, that they talk their book. I mean, you expect that from business. What I have an issue with is when they are pushing and shoving the government after the government makes the decision to walk back or water down what's in Australia's national interest, if perhaps not in their shareholder interest, the shareholder interest of these companies. Has there, or should there be a case, do you think, that some of these links between senior business people in Australia should be investigated as part of those foreign interference or agency laws that you passed through the parliament not so long ago?
Well, the Foreign Influence Transparency Scheme, which came into law in 2018, was designed to bring transparency into the public square. That's not just the political square, but also civil society, which includes the business sector. And so I think it'd be really helpful for those who have very strong business interests in China, who enjoy a good relationship with the PRC regime, the CCP regime, that they declare it. And that way we can debate these issues, but from a position of full transparency, and that makes for a healthy democracy. And that's all we want at the end of the day. It's a free society, everyone can hold their views, but let's be transparent about it.
Andrew, I just want to ask you, because I haven't had a look, how many are on the register though? I mean, how many businesses have declared their relationships with the CCP?
That's a good question. I'd have to go back to it, Peter, but can I encourage all of your viewers to go to the website tonight and have a look for themselves, because they'll be a better informed citizenry and more informed for these sorts of debates.
Yeah, very good point. I'm going to do it myself and I'll put it up on my Facebook. Anthony Byrne, just before we go, I listened carefully to statements from Penny Wong, and you're right, she is a sober voice. I rate her very much. I don't agree with her on a lot of things, but I rate her. She's saying the problem here is the absence of the Foreign Minister, Marise Payne. Now, I'm not saying it's just to be Julie Bishop and court the media every day, but is it a fair argument that she's got to be more vocal and more visible, I think, on this issue?
I was reflecting on this, Peter, before coming up tonight, and I thought about MH17 and the activity of the Foreign Minister, then Julie Bishop, in terms of prosecuting Australia's case. I don't think we can effectively prosecute our case unless we have the Foreign Minister being more active in this space. It's just not. You've had Alexander Downer, you've had Rudd when he was Foreign Minister, there is Julie Bishop when she was Foreign Minister. They're the spokespeople for the nation on the foreign affairs stage. And given that this is costing hundreds of thousands of lives, trillions of dollars to the international community, and the fact that we are pushing strongly, which I know I completely support our Prime Minister with respect to this, for an independent inquiry, it requires a Foreign Minister to be there prosecuting the case every day on behalf of the Australian people. So I do agree with Penny. It's not a criticism of the Foreign Minister, but it's in the national interest for her to be pushing. I would be arguing this every day as Foreign Minister.
Yeah.
It's an expectation I have, and I've been around for a while, as you know, Peter. I've seen active foreign ministers. We need to prosecute this case and make the case in the international community as to why it's critical that we get this independent inquiry up. It's absolutely necessary.
Yeah,
we have to find out
it will be
what
seen
happened.
as a real rebuke if we don't. Now that we've pushed so hard for it, if it fails, I think that's a real slap down to Australia. So I would be putting.
And so what I'd say again, and I'm not trying.
Can I make a point?
And I'm not trying to. Again, this is not a criticism.
Yeah,
but hang
I've
on.
got to go.